We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. You're listening to this on a Thursday. We're recording it Wednesday night. And we have Eric with us, Eric from Iowa. Normally, we're closer neighbors. I'm in Georgia currently. But as you're listening to this, I'm headed back to Minnesota, back to the fucking wild shit that's going on there. Um, but this stuff still continues. And Eric, I'm glad we have you on the show today because there's a lot of details to this. Like I say, I'm a big picture guy. I don't know all the details all the time, but we got so much shit to talk about, and I'm sure people will be anxious to hear what you have to say. Um, I just want to let folks know as we're doing this on Wednesday night, Tim Walls addressed. First of all, thanks for joining us, Eric. I appreciate it. This is a different kind of situation.
Well, thanks for having me. I uh, love being on the show, love sharing the insights I have. Um, like you said, I look at the details. I try to catch up on the details and um, figure out what's going on there. You said you're going back to Minneapolis. Hopefully, it's not as cold as what I'm hearing we could be getting in the next couple days. I heard we could have, over the next couple days here in Iowa, get down to 7 below 0. Um,
Oh,
so
for
you
fuck's
might
sake.
you're leaving the comfort of Georgia to come back to typical Midwestern winter. Uh, you know,
Yeah.
that's ought to be fun.
Well, people in Georgia are complaining about 50s and 40s and even the 60s. You and I love the fuck out of this. If we can sit in 60-degree temperature in January, that's a fucking win anywhere. But as we're talking right now, there are more protests going on in Minneapolis. And no doubt people will have heard this story by the time they hear this podcast, but I'll read this. This is coming out of the Star Tribune. On Wednesday night, a man was shot in the leg during a federal immigration enforcement operation in North Minneapolis. Witnesses says a series of gunshots followed a car chase and a foot chase involving federal agents. The Department of Homeland Security said an agent fired a defensive shots that hit a man in the leg. Defensive shots. Does that mean they shot back at him first? I doubt that. Anyway, so we have another issue where a man is shot in the leg. Thankfully, nobody died. But this is turning into be quite a shit show. And I wanted to bring this up because my wife and I were talking about it earlier. She works at the airport with an airline, and she's been getting text messages from people that ICE showed up at the airport. Now, my question is this: everybody that works for airlines or works in the airport has already got a fucking tag where they were vetted by Homeland Security. So it can't be people that work there because they've already been vetted by Homeland Security. And secondly, if they're trying to get people off the plane, don't they already have to go through security? Don't they have to go through TSA? I don't even understand the point of them walking around with long guns in the airport. It's fucking silly.
Well, we've already heard stories in the course of this administration of immigration. They put out the thing bonus if you self-deport, and that people were trying to get on the plane to do just that, to leave on their own terms, and that ICE was showing up and trying to capture them on the way out of the country and then
Yeah,
deport them.
yeah.
The whole thing is just they're the Keystone Cops, right? They don't know what each side is doing. And half of them aren't even fully trained. We hear that they would normally get 18 weeks of training, which 18 weeks to do that job seems pretty weak if you ask me to begin with.
You would
I
think
know
it'd be more than that.
I know some jobs professionally, like your training period, you're considered in training for longer than 18 weeks for less of a prestigious, maybe that's not the word I'm looking for. Um,
Intensive, intent. I mean, if
intense.
you're
There we
cooking,
go. That's a
if
good
if
word for
if
it.
you're cooking
Less
hamburgers
intensive
or
job.
learning to run a marketing agency, you don't need 16 weeks. But if you're carrying an AK-47 or an AR-15, you probably should have some fucking time in
Right.
training.
But they cut that down because of Donald Trump, or to honor Donald Trump. They cut it down
Oh,
to 47 days because he's the 47th president.
oh, for
I
fuck's
mean,
sake.
and beyond that, we haven't heard much from the three percenters, the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, um, Patriot Front, and the rest of those fucked up militia groups, the wannabe cosplayers, the Gravy Seals or Meal Team Six. That's because most of them that haven't learned their lesson because of spending some time in prison have gotten roped into ICE.
Right. As I understand it, the reports I've been hearing is that people in ICE are getting a little nervous. I mean, the point of what they're doing is to instill fear, to intimidate, to bully. That's really what they're trying to do. And they're doing exactly what they've been told. But as I understand it now, after the shooting of Renee Good and the reaction out of the Minnesota protesters, some of the ICE agents are getting really fucking nervous. Let's take the guy who did the shooting, Jonathan Ross. Here's a Mr. Tough Guy, Mr. Patriot. He shoots this woman, says it's justified. Everybody around him says it's justified. Then please explain to me why this motherfucker is in hiding right now and won't come out. Is he afraid of getting arrested by the state? Or is he afraid of just being torn apart at the streets? I got to be honest with you. I would question his safety if he was walking down any street in Minneapolis at this point.
Yeah, he's in hiding because he's afraid of everything. And the only reason that he thinks it's any kind of justification is because look at who's above him. You got Kristi Noem, you got Pam Bondi, you got Kash Patel, and you got Donald Trump. If he was a regular ICE agent under, say, the Biden administration and this happened, he would know that they'd be prosecuted
Right,
federally.
absolutely.
What happened? His job would be on the line. He'd be on administrative leave and all these things. But he's there. But he's afraid that the state's going to go after him for state charges because Donald Trump can't pardon state charges. It just doesn't happen.
I've been watching that video over and over again where they insist that he was hit and then people say he wasn't hit. And I got one vantage point um, where it's coming from a different angle. And I can see him. First of all, he does what he's not supposed to do. He steps in front of the car. And we found out since that that is a strategy that they've been told to use to give them an excuse to shoot who's ever in the car. And what I see happen as the car is turning, you see him kind of lean over and touch the top of the hood and then scoot back as if he had been hit. But he was doing the old trick that you no doubt did when you were in high school, or I did when I was high school, and your friend would be coming by you. You'd hit the top of the hood or the trunk and go, "Oh, you hit me!" And it's a joke, you know. But it looked like he was making an attempt to look like he got hit. He didn't get hit because he walked away under his own power, no problem. Anybody wants to debate that, happy to talk to him. I watched him walk from the site all the way to his car with nary a limp, and he was fine. But it looked as though they are in the process of trying to give the appearance that these people are trying to hit them so they have an excuse to shoot.
Yeah, and beyond that, I guess no, I haven't seen the video footage, but I've heard other people talking about it. Apparently, there's video out there from neighbors or testimony from neighbors anyway, who said not only that, he went home, they saw him packing boxes and like moving stuff to go into hiding and everything, and he seemed fine. But now, apparently, official statements coming out from ICE and Homeland Security and stuff are saying he had internal bleeding from being hit by the
Please.
car. If he had
He looked
internal bleeding,
fine.
he looked fine. He at most had a very small bruise, and that does not justify shooting someone.
Right. Even if he did get hit a little bit, that doesn't justify the pulling of the gun. And here's the thing, before that woman turned, he already had his gun pulled. He knew what he wanted to do. He knew what he was going to try to do. And shooting somebody, anybody, let alone a woman, a mother, in the face three times, there's no way you can justify that. If a police officer did that, at best, be put on administrative leave until there was an investigation. That's not happened here. He may be on leave, but there is going to be no investigation because the feds and the FBI said, well, there's no point to looking into this, which is typical Donald Trump bullshit.
Well, there's no investigation yet. There will be an investigation into this at some point, probably when this administration is gone and the next one takes over, because there is no statute of limitations for a murder charge.
Right.
And that's the problem. I think the rest of ICE should stand up and take notice of this and go, oh shit, maybe we've gone too far. Maybe we need to be worried because they're all going to be facing problems down the road when this administration's over. And they think Donald Trump is going to save him. Donald Trump is going to be worried if he's alive about saving his own ass. And I still don't know that he's going to be alive come 2029. And who knows if JD Vance would be willing to save any of them.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think if Donald Trump dies or somehow removed from office and JD Vance takes over as president, a lot of shit is going to come out on Donald Trump. He's going to become a pariah. At that point, the Republicans are going to try to reinvent themselves, rehabilitate themselves, and they're going to have JD Vance on a short leash trying to get them back to normal after Donald Trump sent them down this fucking cliff.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, Donald Trump being gone is only part of the problem. Like you said, they have to reinvent themselves. And JD is probably not going to be the person to lead them forward, but he's
No.
going to be who they have in the meantime. And yeah, they're probably going to be slowly stepping away from Donald Trump policies. Well, while it may not be everything all at once, he might start backing off the tariffs. He will do this. Suddenly he won't renew something else Donald Trump did, or it'll all be quiet stuff behind the scenes as much as they can. But he's going to let Donald Trump take the fall for a lot of things publicly and let those chips fall against him and hope that he can get as far away from any of the fallout as he can.
Yeah, he's going to want to be fighting against Donald Trump. He wants to expose him, put everything on him because he's going to have a lot of stink on him as well. I saw a video, after the shooting, and I thought it was interesting. A woman had a camera on an ICE officer, and he was telling her to move on and you shouldn't do this. And he looks at her and he says, "After the last couple of days, haven't you learned a lesson?" And my question is, what's the lesson? If you don't behave, we're going to shoot you. My question to that ICE officer is, after you saw what happened when this woman has been shot and you look at the streets and how you're being treated, don't ask this woman if you've learned a lesson. You motherfucker, have you learned a lesson? And then we hear about somebody shot in the leg tonight on Wednesday night, and apparently they haven't learned a lesson, or apparently their mission is to intimidate and shoot and hurt and harm people. I mean, I'm watching them pushing people over for no fucking reason. This shit's got to stop. This is definite bullying tactics, and there's got to be some words are fine, but there's got to be some action here pretty quick.
Yeah, there's going to end up being some pushback. Something's going to happen. And Donald Trump wants them to go as far as possible because he wants to have some kind of reason to unleash the military on U.S. citizens. To say it's every bit as violent as I've been saying, see, I'm right. Let me send in the National Guard. And the fact is, he thinks that he is such a master strategist. It might not even be him. It could be the fuckers that are around Donald Trump, convincing him of what's going on and stuff that are pulling the strings. But they think that they can send in then the military and that no one would stop them and everybody would just suddenly comply because all the military's there. And that's a bold strategy. I just don't think it's going to work. They don't understand that we outnumber them by a large margin.
Right.
And they think this is going to work, but it won't, especially now in the days of the internet where, beforehand, you could maybe send out the military and, work place to place and kind of work your way through a country or whatever. Now, the minute they try going to one place, we know about it minutes after it's happening.
Right.
That It's not going to work in their favor.
Well, there's no question that Donald Trump is targeting Minnesota. He has a number of reasons to do that. It's a blue state. There are a lot of politicians in Congress that are from Minnesota that don't like Donald Trump. He hates Tim Walz because he was an opponent in the election. Tim Walz has spoke out against him. So he's specifically targeting Minnesota. He not only brings in the ice, but now he's bringing in more. He's going around kicking in doors. None of this is legal. And there isn't one Republican, I'd be happy to talk to any of them, that can show me how that is legal. Constitutionally, it's not legal. Now, Jacob Fry, the mayor of Minneapolis, has said some shit, get the fuck out of my city. Tim Walz has said some strong things too, and I appreciate that. And that's well and good if we're threat against threat. But we're in the throes of violence against citizens of Minneapolis and the state of Minnesota. Now's not the time to push back or be political. There's got to be something that these people can do. Now, Tim Walz had suggested that he has the National Guard on standby. Well, with people getting shot in the streets, doors getting kicked in, if Tim Walz has any interest in being president of the United States, he could get a big leg up by bringing in the National Guard and pushing ICE out. So I like Tim Walz, but you got to fucking do something. You can't continue to allow people to get killed. First job of the government is to protect the citizens. And there's nothing being done at this point to protect the citizens from the federal government.
No, they're not protecting us at this point. And ICE going through door to door, kicking in doors looking for immigrants. Well, we're protected from that by the Fourth Amendment.
Right.
And that is considered an unreasonable search and seizure. And anytime they come in without a warrant, homeowners are allowed in most states, due to stand your ground laws or castle doctrine, they can defend their home. Start putting a couple of them down, and maybe they'd start reacting differently, and they'd second guess doing this. Um, it's a bad strategy all around. I mean, did you see that video from the homeowner whose DoorDasher ran inside her house because ICE swarmed the house,
Right.
and the DoorDasher was an immigrant. Now she didn't want the dasher in her house, but she also didn't want to turn him over to ICE either. So she called local law enforcement to get ICE off her property and get the woman out of her house.
So what happens when they call the police? They were telling people at the airport where my wife works. She's not there right now. She's here in Savannah with me. But they said if you feel uncomfortable, call the police. Do the police come out and do something? Can the police come out and do something? I don't know what happens when you call the police because a lot of these police fuckers, especially Minneapolis cops, aren't a lot better than ICE.
Yeah, I don't know because in part, I think it would come down to the individual agent or the individual officer because, while they
It
may not be
shouldn't, though.
better, well, but if they're looking at it going, yeah, these guys, they're feds, I'm going to protect my own because I'm from here.
Right.
Maybe they do something. I don't know what actually happens. We've never been in situations like this before where we've had to worry about protecting ourselves from federal agents because they've always worked in tandem with each other, and you didn't have a group going rogue like this administration just doing whatever the fuck it wants. And they're going to burn everything down as best they can uh, between now and whenever Donald Trump is gone.
You mentioned the castle doctrine. I know we have the castle doctrine in Minnesota. And what that basically means is if someone breaks into your house and you feel in danger, you can attack with deadly whatever you call it. You can shoot them. You could do whatever it takes to save your life. Now, people will say, "Well, but they're the feds and they're different because they're ICE." Well, the fact of the matter is, it doesn't. I think it's the Fourth Amendment with search and seizure. It doesn't
Mhm.
delineate who breaks into your house or hurts you or for what reason. And they don't have a right by the Constitution to do that. So you would be justified in protecting yourself in that situation, especially when you got a bunch of guys with big guns and masks and not really identifying themselves. You don't know who that is, so you have a right to react appropriately.
And not to mention, there's always, there's always the option for jury nullification, where even if, that was still true and you got charged, the jury could still say, yeah, I agree. I'd do the same thing. You're not guilty because I would have acted the same way. Um, so there's a lot of protections there. And these ICE agents, they're doing whatever they want, partially because they're not trained, partially because they want to. I mean, we talked about, you said the one video where he tells the gal, haven't you learned your lesson? There was another video where I think they caught a pastor or a preacher or something, and they handcuffed him, threw him in the vehicle for a while, and then they let him go and said to him, yeah, we're going to let you go. You wouldn't be any fun anyway.
Yeah, I can tell you that story because I watched this guy being interviewed. He was a pastor, a clergyman. They uh, they walked up to him and he said, "I'm not afraid." So apparently that caused them to be butthurt. So they handcuffed him and put him in a car. And they said, "Are you afraid now?" He said, "Nope, I'm not afraid." And then they didn't know what to do. And like you said, they said, "Well, you're white, so it wouldn't be fun anyway." They put this guy in handcuffs and in the car simply for saying he wasn't afraid, simply talking back to them. And to be honest with you, if you look at the rules and regulations, um, you can't detain somebody as an ICE agent for heckling you, talking back to you. You can't do that. But these fucking clowns are so untrained. That's exactly what they're doing. They're picking up guys at Target, beating the shit out of them, and dumping them on in a parking lot at Walmart. These are fucking thugs. These aren't members of the federal government. They aren't with ICE or whatever. I wanted to bring, I mentioned the National Guard and Tim Walz bringing in the National Guard. People say we can't do that because it's the federal government, the ICE and the National Guard. That just wouldn't work. Republicans have really been big on the Second Amendment. And unfortunately, they don't understand the Second Amendment. But in the Second Amendment, it says we have a right to keep and bear arms, right? And then it references a regulated militia. What would be a better definition of a regulated militia than the National Guard? Not just a bunch of fucking farmers and clowns with guns, an actual militia like the National Guard. They're intended to protect the citizens and help out the citizens of Minnesota. Republicans love the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment that is there, and correct me if I'm wrong, it wasn't so that everybody could have guns and have AR-15s in their basement. The forefathers put that in the Constitution for one very good reason. They understood the possibility of a rogue government taking over, much like we have right now. And they wanted the people of the country to be able to protect themselves and maybe overthrow that rogue government to try to get things back to normal. Am I on track there? Does that make sense?
That was part of it. The other part of it was, if you look at our army from the Revolutionary period, we didn't have, like, we had just as many uh, individual militias as we had mainline full on army. We
Right.
had groups from all the colonies that they'd formed, 100 people thick or whatever, and they were off doing their bit and helping where they could. Well, they didn't answer to the full army. And you had a lot of times, because we didn't have the funds at the time to fund a full army, a lot of people
Right.
brought their own guns, their own ammunition. And when they left, they took that with them. They went home. And they initially never wanted us to have a full on permanent standing army. They were thinking that about having, an army that we would call up in time, like they did back then, of volunteers at the time when it was needed, and you'd bring your own equipment.
Right,
that was a big chunk of it. But there was the other side of it too was, well, if the government's the only group that has any weaponry, we can't defend ourselves if we need it from the government because
right.
we had just had to defend ourselves from the British government when we were British citizens, where the king, uh, King George, turned the entire British military against their own citizens. So both things were true.
Yeah, if nothing else, we do have a rogue government right now. I mean, it's out of control. Um, I don't know if you heard earlier in the day that they were going to pass, I think they may have passed through the House, the War Powers Act to limit what Donald Trump could do in Venezuela. But then when it got to the Senate, they voted against it, basically giving Donald Trump carte blanche to do whatever he wants to do in in Venezuela. And the fact of the matter is, the Republicans in Congress have pretty much um, made Congress in general impotent. It's almost as if Congress doesn't really even exist at this point because they have chosen to give Donald Trump full reign to do whatever the fuck he wants. And once again, that's the Republicans. When this is all over and you want to blame somebody, Republicans in Congress, every motherfucking one of them.
Yeah, exactly. It is the Republicans' fault. They have abdicated their responsibility. And the weird thing about that War Powers resolution is initially five Republican senators sided with Democrats to bring it up to a full vote. Um, they had enough votes to get it to a full vote, and two of them changed their vote to make it a split vote, 50-50, and JD Vance was the tiebreaker. So of course Vance went with Donald Trump on it. Um,
And how do you
they
suppose
had
that
no
happened? How do you suppose that happened? Donald Trump called and threatened him?
probably,
Yeah, had to be.
probably. There's something he's got on him, whatever they think he's got on him is enough that they're still thinking and they haven't realized that listening to Donald Trump is going to hurt them politically. We talk
Yeah.
about it all the time. You know, midterms are coming. They're still worried about whether or not they have the endorsement of Donald Trump going into that midterm because, oh, well, if he says they're going to primary me, they could primary me out of my seat and I wouldn't have a job. And then I wouldn't be able to make almost $200,000 a year and make millions in insider trading because
But
they
if you
all trade stocks.
but if you stick with Donald Trump, I don't know how they don't see it. There's a likelihood they're not only maybe going to get primaried, but they're going to lose the seat completely and it's going to go to a fucking Democrat. I can't believe that they're so blind that they don't understand that. I mean, everything they're doing is absolutely decimating the Republican Party. And I'm happy to see that they're doing that. But in the process, they're hurting a lot of people. And over and above losing their seat, some of these people are going to have to look at possible investigations after this is all said and done. You know, people
Yeah,
like
they
Jim
are.
Jordan, people like people in the cabinet, Hegseth, Bondi, all these fuckers are going to be implicated in serious crimes in this country when there's a reasonable government and a reasonable DOJ in position.
Oh, yeah, there are going to be massive investigations when this is all said and done. They're
They
going to
don't
be
see
digging.
that though. You and I
No,
see that. A couple of dumb fucks in the Midwest can see it. They don't see that.
no, because they think that either by the time it gets here, that we're going to have moved on into something else. And, you know, the only thing that, well, that could happen is they could be right. If Donald Trump is gone this year and it's 2 years before there's a Democratic administration and they fix some shit, there may not be the desire for it to go after it, at least but from certain people. But I think ultimately there's going to be an investigation. There's going to be criminal charges. There's going to be everything, but they don't see it because they think, much like the ruling party in Germany in the 1930s, they think it's going to go on for 1,000 years, and that they have all kinds of, you know, they have all kinds of power. I've said it before. I think realistically, the worst thing that could have happened to the Republicans happened when they won in 24.
Yeah.
They expected to lose. Everything that you and I saw, everything that the experts were seeing was all pointing toward Kamala Harris winning the presidency, the Democrats keeping the Senate and flipping the House, and having, you know, a Democratic for at least 2 more years, if not four. And then somehow, beyond all odds, Republicans flip the House or keep the House, flip the Senate, and take the presidency. They fell ass backwards into the trifecta, and now they've got to do something, and now they feel invulnerable because they won against all odds, just like what happened with Donald Trump in 2016. He beat the boogeyman. He beat the odds-on favorite, and the way the Democrats were running with Hillary Clinton in 2016, they were treating it like she was a foregone conclusion that she was absolutely going to win. And
Yeah.
Donald Trump fell ass backwards into the presidency then too. And that's, why they're so emboldened, because they didn't expect to win and then they did. And they're like, well, clearly luck's on our side, God's on our side, whatever thing you want to call it. They're convinced they can do no wrong at this point.
I've said this a number of times, and I'm curious as to what you think about this. Some part of me thinks that the Democrats are cool with all this bad stuff happening. They're not as upset about it. When Kamala lost, they said, "All right, fuck it. You get what you asked. You'll get what you asked for, but it's going to be bad." And the worse it gets, the better it looks for them in the midterms. Do you think there are Democrats out there that say, "Fuck it, this is what you want. You fucked around and find out, so we'll let this fucker burn, and then in 2026 we'll see if you learned anything."
I think in a way you might be onto something. It's not so much that they want to see it happen or that they're okay with letting it all burn, but at the same point they're looking at going, well, you didn't give us any sort of position, any sort of power here where we can block anything. We don't have the House, we don't have the Senate. Donald Trump's the president. What do you want us to do? You had the opportunity to prevent it. We gave you an open book test and you failed. And, what else can we do here? So while they're not as vocal as what some people would like, say, coming out speaking against it, I think it's because they're just like, what can we do here? We can't fix it. All we can do is come out and say shit. But when we say shit, you come out and say it's not enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there are some things you could do. Walls could bring out the National Guard. Um, this shows that we have some holes in our government. This has exposed our government to be much weaker than I think any of us thought. If one fucking clown with a dirty diaper can create this much havoc, there's something wrong with the way our system works. And part of it is the lie that no one's above the law. Let's throw that fucking out. A president is above the law. Members of Congress are above the law. Rich and powerful people, they are above the law. And we need some kind of reform with our judicial system and our legal system if we hope to get through the next 10 years. Because if this continues, they'll do this until they destroy the country.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have to reform a bunch. And I think there's going to be a bunch of changes after this administration is gone. Much like how there were changes after we had FDR. They said, okay, we don't want to have a president be elected 4 times. Um, they came out with the 25th Amendment after Kennedy was assassinated, where they
Right.
finally clarified how the line of succession works and how to actually fill a vacancy in the vice presidency. And I think there's going to be fixes coming after this administration is gone. Um, but we have to fix a bunch and we have to start holding people accountable because you're right. This government, our country has flaws in part because it was founded on an idea that, well, if the president acted the way this president was doing, that the people in Congress would be honorable enough to step up, regardless of party lines, and say, no, you're not going to keep doing this. You're out of here. We need somebody else. And that's why they put impeachment into the Constitution, because they thought Congress would have the courage to stand up to whoever it was. They wanted a way to remove the president. They never envisioned a party that would fall in line and be so complicit with somebody. And they're only complicit because uh, Donald Trump did something that they couldn't fathom. He beat Hillary Clinton. Two, he won in 2024 when the momentum said otherwise. And he brought in a group of voters into the conservative movement that weren't going to vote before. And he revitalized the party. They looked like they were losing up until the point Donald Trump came around.
Right, right, exactly. They didn't have much else to put up for president. And while Donald Trump wasn't a very savory candidate. He was the one candidate that could give them some hope. So they were basically clinging to life and they grasped onto Donald Trump and did a deal with the devil so that the Republicans could maintain some power. Because you're right, they were in the process of losing power. They didn't have any real candidates. Um, I mean, be honest with you, after what Donald Trump did in the first term and COVID and all that shit, the idea to bring Donald Trump back is kind of unprecedented. You don't bring losing candidates back after the fact to run again. That never happens. But it did happen in this case because that's all the Republicans fucking had.
Well, it wasn't so much that's all they had. They had some potential. But the problem was they never stepped up and said, okay, no to Donald Trump. If they would have told him, you know, when he announced his candidacy, if the RNC would have said, yeah, we're not going to even put you on the primary ballot for 2024. We're not going to allow it. They could have done some things, but instead they did. They had other candidates. There are other people in the Republican Party, not good candidates, but
Not
they have
strong
some.
candidates. Yeah.
No, but they have people who would want to run. Ted Cruz,
Rubio,
Nikki Haley. Uh, you said Rubio?
Rubio, Nikki Haley, yeah, those
Yes.
kind of
And a few
people.
others that could have ran in 2024. They could have ran somebody, but they let Donald Trump just do whatever they wanted because they didn't know how to say no to this guy. If this would have been the Democrats would have said, no, we're not even going to consider it. You know, look at how you led Joe Biden to get the most votes of anybody in a presidential election against you. Why would we run you again? It wasn't even close. I mean,
Yeah.
it was much closer in 2000 with Gore and Bush, and Al Gore never ran again. We haven't really talked about Al Gore since he lost the presidential run in 2020 or in 2000. I mean, um, in 20 years we haven't talked about Gore, but Donald Trump loses in 2020, and 4 years later he's back on the ballot.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things we've always talked about, with Donald Trump when he got reelected, I've said, and I know you've said it too, is we're dealing with a narcissist, and a narcissist has a very typical arc. They go strong for a long time, and then they start to fade a little bit. They start to spiral. And then when they get to the point where there's no way out, they're starting to get cornered and they're in a bad position. That's when the flailing starts. And I think we both understand that when the flailing starts, that's when it gets the ugliest. The good news is we're closer to the end, to the crash. But we're in that moment in time that I think we've all said before, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And frankly, I don't know how much it could get worse than it already is because he's flailing around in Venezuela, in Greenland, in Iran, in Minneapolis, in cities around the country. He's still fucking with the tariffs and the economy's going to shit. He's he's going around. He's like a little kid in his bedroom who's upset and knocking everything off the shelves and knocking everything off the tables and shit. So we're in that point where it's very ugly and I'm sorry to say it's probably going to get uglier before it's over.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't know what the crash point is going to be. When does he crash out? Is there going to come a point when he just tucks his tail between his legs and he runs away? Are they going to throw him out, or is the Big Mac going to finally get him? And I think it's going to probably take the Big Mac. Um, I mean, I don't know that I've been thinking the Republicans would do more and push back harder than what they have, and they haven't. Um, so I don't know that he goes out that way. Maybe when that one picture comes out that we can't deny anymore about the Epstein files. I mean, already been some stories out, but there's been no proof picture wise that links him to the Epstein files. And if maybe the Epstein files are what would get the Republicans to turn on him and throw him out completely. Otherwise, I think we just got to wait for the Big Mac to take its course.
Yeah, you and I both, as we scrolled around, and I've talked about this a couple of times, and I'm very cautious about talking about it because I know how things happen on TikTok. We haven't seen anything out of the DOJ with regarding the uh, files. We know that they've gone to the judge and said, "Hey, they're not complying. So can we get a special master?" That may happen, and I don't know how they could put up stumbling blocks in front of a special master, but I'm assuming they can. Um, but we've been hearing this story, and everybody says, "Oh, talk about it, talk about it," and I don't really like talking about it because it's a horrible story. Um, it's atrocious. Uh, and I haven't seen absolute verification that it's true. And I'm very reluctant about going all in on something that I don't have verification for. You and I have seen people on TikTok jumping on some bandwagon and then having to walk it back. I don't want to have to do that. And as I'm talking, what I'm talking about is the Sasha Riley audio tapes that we've heard. We've heard a ton of audio tapes, and the stories are fucking absolutely crazy. I've said it. I think Hawk said it. If these stories are true, you might as well burn the whole fucking country down and start over. Fumigate and start the fuck over. Because what the stories are suggesting involved uh, trafficking, sexual assault, a big business behind it, fucking murder. Jesus Christ. But we need some verification for this. We need something other than a guy saying this. Now, I'm not saying this guy's lying. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying before I go all in on something, I need absolute proof because anybody could say anything. I could talk shit about Donald Trump and say, when I was a little kid, this happened. But I need some facts. What was your gut reaction when you heard these Sasha Riley things?
Well, I've heard some of it, and it's appalling and disgusting. But a couple of the things that I heard that are one way we could actually prove part of it is and I don't know if you heard this story out of it. I don't know how much of the Sasha Riley stuff you heard, but apparently I don't know the full context, but as part like Sasha Riley had been being abused by Donald Trump or something, or was
Yeah.
going to be, and got pissed off at Donald Trump for what was going on and kicked a tent stake straight up Donald Trump's backside. And that is why Donald Trump wears diapers. I don't know if it's true, but I'm sure there would be medical records to prove it somewhere. If because he would have probably gotten medical treatment for that. You know, if that's true, that could prove ultimately Sasha Riley's story. The other thing that makes some sense with these stories is something we've talked about before, that we could find out that Donald Trump was a partner in everything that was going on with Epstein because of the uh, talent shows and the beauty pageants and everything that he was involved in. He had a way of getting girls that way and feeding them into the Epstein trafficking machine. But we find out, according to Sasha Riley, that Epstein wasn't the kingpin, it was Donald Trump. and knowing how Donald Trump feels about money and making money, et cetera, and how, we look at how Donald Trump is constantly losing money. If there is a different kingpin, that would make sense that it's Donald Trump because all of his businesses fail. So maybe this was the only way he made any sort of money.
Well, yeah, that's one thing that makes me look twice at it is what he said about Donald Trump, and it's kind of the same thing you and I've said. I said at the very least he's a partner. There isn't that much money involved in something where Donald Trump doesn't stick his nose into it. Um, and him being the kingpin, as it were, and Jeffrey Epstein being the manager, that's the way I think Sasha Riley explained it, makes some sense. I mean, Jeffrey Epstein has been quoted as saying that he was a friend of Donald Trump's for 15 years, but he also looked at Donald Trump as a mentor. So why would the mentee be working for, um, or the mentor be working for the mentee? Why would that happen? That makes some sense. But we need some. I mean, the part of this I like. I like the noise. I like the narrative out there of people just talking about it, whether it's true or not. I mean, Republicans made their bones doing that very same thing. Oh, Joe Biden did this or Joe Biden did that. I'm happy to hear this noise and these rumors going around because I know it's hurting the Republicans. I know there are some people that will believe it outright. I know there are some people that have heard these stories that want so badly for it to be true that they may get mad at somebody like me for not fully buying in and reporting it like everybody else is. But I've seen this shit before. I've seen people report stuff, and then we find out it's nothing but nothing burger. I'm not saying this one is, but I need some verification. Show me a picture. Show me a videotape. Show me some documentation with Donald Trump's signature on it. And then we can look at it as a real situation. If we want to get Donald Trump, whether it be for Jeffrey Epstein, we can't come out with fake shit because that's going to give him more credibility. We got to come out with the real shit and it's got to come out now. Now, you talked about videos and pictures of Donald Trump in compromising positions. We know they exist. We know they're in the files. In fact, those files might verify exactly what Sasha Riley is saying. So we've got to get somebody to leak something or get it out of the Epstein estate or something. And I'm convinced at some point in the not too distant future, we are going to get something like that.
Yeah, once we get something definitive, and it doesn't even have to be a picture of Donald Trump and Sasha Riley. It just has to be, I mean, one good picture of Donald Trump with an underage girl, maybe even just topless, would be enough to show that he's in the file. And that would be enough to convince people that there's some credibility, especially when it comes through official channels. Whether it's being leaked out by the oversight committee or whatever. Um, one good photo will guarantee that this story has enough to go with it. Like you said, we can't run on speculation. And while it is a good narrative, and the Sasha Riley story sounds great, okay? Sounds
Well,
like
this
there's a
sounds
lot
great in
there.
terms of getting Donald Trump. The fucking stories itself are obviously
Well,
horrible.
that's what I mean, right? Like it sounds like a way to go after Donald Trump, and it sounds like it fits everything we want to believe about Donald Trump.
Right.
The thing is, we can't fall in the same trap the right does. I mean, they wanted to believe all these horrible things about Joe Biden. You know, they talked about Joe Biden and his granddaughter and him being inappropriate when there was nothing there. We're still hearing about that, even though it's been disproven, I don't know how many times. We need actual hard proof because the right will never believe it because they will believe something that doesn't have any proof behind it, so they think we would do the exact same thing.
Well, they do. And We just want whatever happens to Donald Trump to be solid and completely implicating him in something. I've said this before. Everybody's worried about all the people that are in the Jeffrey Epstein files. I like to take problems and narrow them down to one problem, the main problem that will make the rest of it a lot easier. And I'm convinced that we've got a lot of people that are guilty in the Epstein files. I don't think there's any question about it based on what we've seen already, and we haven't even seen that much. But if we cut the head off the snake and we somehow implicate Donald Trump, if we focus just on that, implicate Donald Trump, and then he is no longer in power, since he is the one that's holding back this information, I would presume that once Donald Trump is no more and isn't in a position to pressure people to hold this back, this shit will come out flooding out and a lot of people will be implicated. But I think we focus on Donald Trump to make sure he's gone. I question, the Oversight Committee has a lot of these files uh, from the Epstein estate. Do they have files that are problematic? Yeah, they do because they said they do, but they haven't released them yet. I don't know what the game is that they're trying to play. Are they waiting for the perfect time or the perfect situation to release this stuff? I don't know. But I know there are people in Congress that have seen some horrible pictures. They are the reason we haven't seen them. So we need to get them to step up and fucking put a bow on this thing and get it over with.
Well, I think part of what they're waiting for is for Donald Trump to be on his way out, whether that's Congress going turning their back on him, whether that's he's laying in a hospital bed, maybe he's even on his way to be put 6 foot under. Um, when he's not there, and then they'll release the floodgates and let everything out about him. I just don't think. I think they are going to try to do everything they can to protect him for as long as they possibly can while he is still breathing, um, because they know how bad it makes not only him look, but the rest of the Republicans look for supporting somebody like him. If it comes out that he is actually, like Sasha Riley said, he's the kingpin of the Epstein ring, and to know that the Republicans backed him to two presidential terms, two separate terms, and that he was their candidate 3 times in a row, and how much they've bowed down to him. The Republicans would be lucky if they get voted in again for anything ever.
Well, exactly. What Sasha Riley is basically saying, not only is Donald Trump the kingpin in this pedophile ring, um, he assaulted little girls. Apparently, he assaulted little boys. But even beyond that, Sasha Riley makes him out to be some fucking crazed murderer. And that's the point when I go, okay, if that's the case, we want to see some evidence of this. Now, Sasha Riley has said that he would testify in front of Congress. He would take a lie detector test. My guess is if he took a lie detector test, most people on the right wouldn't even accept it because it's not something you can bring into the court of law. So there's no point in doing that. There's got to be some sort of evidence. Either Sasha Riley has it or somebody does. But we know the evidence exists, and it doesn't have to be as egregious as what Sasha Riley is saying. But there's something there, and there's some reason. You don't think the Democrats are holding this back to get closer to the midterm so it has a bigger impact? I can't imagine they'd be that fucking ridiculous, but at the same time, when we watch politics, it doesn't sound that fucking crazy.
No, it doesn't sound that far out of the realm of possibility, especially considering most voters have about a 3 to 6 month memory span. Now, for
Right.
something as big as Donald Trump being the kingpin of the Epstein ring, you know, that would be big news. And I think people would remember that a lot more. But look what happened. We thought overturning Roe v. Wade was going to be the big thing going into 2024 because they did it in 2023.
Yeah.
And we thought that was going to be huge, and we would have all sorts of coverage, and we would win big. And it didn't really have as big of an impact. In fact, we lost the presidency and the Senate. So if they are holding it back, I don't think it's the Democrats doing anything here. I think it's again just the fact the Republicans are in charge. They're the ones trying to game the system here. And they're, I think, trying to protect Donald Trump, but ultimately this stuff is going to come out. And if it is as bad as what Sasha Riley has suggested, that he is not only the kingpin, but a murderer and stuff, that would lead some credibility to other things we have seen in the files, like when they talk about Donald Trump in Lake Michigan, that tip sheet
Right.
that didn't get redacted, and all of it. Um, it is going to be horrific for the Republican Party, and they may not survive Donald Trump coming out as the kingpin of the Epstein files. Like they could have a very weak congressional majority for a long time afterward, especially if they have to keep holding, if the Democrats do it right and they hold future candidates to the fire and say, okay, you were in Congress when this guy was there. You're up for reelection. Why are you still, well, do you still support Donald Trump? Why did you support Donald Trump? Did you know he was the kingpin behind all of this? You know, Democrats could end up with a supermajority in both houses in the next 6 years and really make a difference if they played their cards right.
I should give, I don't know, I don't want to speak for you, but I have a sense that you're probably of the same mindset. Say we come to the 2026 election and Republicans are pretty much eradicated. Democrats have power of the House and the Senate, and we get a Democratic president to the point where Republicans, like you say, are out of power and really don't have anything to say about it. I want to warn people that I'm going to be just as diligent, and I expect you are. But we are going to end up going after certain Democrats that are more centrist, that are more tied to the wealthy, and that are just as, I won't say just as guilty, but guilty of not serving us. We've got a lot of problems in this government. Certainly all the Republicans need to fucking go. I don't care. Even the ones like Massey who are saying, well, I'm trying to do something good now. Yeah, but you were there along the way when he was getting to this point. It's not until this point where you decided that you're going to fight back. But we got a lot of cleanup to do. The midterms is one, the presidential election is another, but that doesn't fix our government completely. We still have Democrats that aren't our friends as much as we'd like to think they are. They are not our friends. Schumer, I don't trust him. Hakeem Jeffries, I don't trust him. Some of the other establishment folks, they don't get it yet. They think this is 1998 and that's how they're going to govern. That's not going to play anymore after these Republicans are gone.
Yeah, we have to do first steps first is let's get
Right,
um, Democrats back in power. That's why, like in 2020, I was okay with Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema. Sure, they were a pain in the ass, but a lot of what they would do is they would balk at things and they would come out and they would play these games and they'd put up a big fight and then they go back to their districts or their state, district for Matt or no, they were both senators back to their state and say, look, guys, I tried to prevent them from doing this. Um, but ultimately it was going to pass anyway, so I had to vote for it. Um, and I was okay with them playing those kind of games as long as they voted the right way. But
right.
we can't, because that was going to start fixing some of the immediate problems. Once the immediate problems are fixed, then we got to go to work and getting rid of those people or making sure we have a big enough majority that one vote like that or two votes like that can't sink anything we're trying to do. Because if they're going to play games like that, uh, it only works when we have 60, 65 senators in the Democratic Party, or we got 290 in the House, something like that. And then they can vote in ways that are, against maybe the party lines. Problem with Republicans is they just expect people to automatically vote party line, and it tends to happen.
It does tend to happen until people start feeling the pinch. There are farmers out there that will still vote for a Republican come 2028, but there are some of them that will not. Um, and I think Democrats make the mistake of saying, well, we've got to convert some of the Republicans. You're not going to do that. The Republicans aren't the target, it's the independents. The independents are the target. Whoever wins the independents wins the election. So let's focus on those people and fuck the Republicans. If they want to starve themselves, put themselves out of business, fucking let them. It's the what it's the survival of the fittest. And if you're too dumb and you vote for a Republican, you deserve what the fuck you get.
Exactly. And, we're hearing Donald Trump talking about cutting off funding to blue states.
Yes,
And of course, it's not going to work. But if he does that and blue states cut off the supply of tax money back, because they're all donor states, the red states are going to be the ones to suffer. And they're going to be in the find out stages. And maybe that is the only time they find out. But you're talking about going after the independents and stuff. I think that was where Kamala Harris made the mistake. We talked about it even right around the election. She spent too much time running around with Liz Cheney trying to court Republican voters that she
right.
didn't make sure she had her side and the independents locked down firm to actually win the race. And we can't make that same mistake again.
Well, yeah, we heard that Donald Trump was going to cut off funding to blue states on February 1st. That's a couple weeks away. That's not that far away. Um, and I suggested that too, and Gavin Newsom has suggested it. Well, if you're going to cut off funding to the state, why are we paying federal taxes? And if we're going to continue to pay federal taxes, wouldn't it make sense for the blue states just to not send in the federal taxes to the U.S. government? I mean, if we're donor states, Minnesota, California, and places like that, theoretically, if we're donor states, we should be able to afford whatever the fuck uh, we need to cover in our own state without the help of the federal government. My question is this. Governors talk about doing this. Governors talk about bringing in the National Guard. Will they actually do it, though? Will they actually? I mean, because once you do that, once you cut off money to the federal government and bring in the National Guard, we're essentially in a civil war right now. Maybe not in the traditional sense, but it's a civil war, blue against red.
Yeah, I don't know if any states are actually going to do it. They should. And I don't, but see, the thing is, I don't know how it would actually work because of, collecting like your wages income tax and how all of that applies. And, that seems to be way more complicated. It sounds great as a campaign thing or a response. Well, we'll
Right,
just quit sending in our federal tax money. I just don't know how feasible it actually is. Maybe somebody who has more of an accounting background or a tax background would know more and could enlighten both of us into how they could actually make that happen. But the thing is, blue states are donor states, and you're right. It makes more sense for them to just keep the money they have, um, because even when they get money like for a grant from the federal government, it was their money to begin with. Because
right,
most donor states, I think California is one of the worst as far as I think they kick in for every dollar they send to the federal government, they get 67 cents back or something
right,
like that.
right,
It's ridiculously low. But then you got to play a state like, and I'm probably getting the exact numbers wrong, but I want to say like Mississippi, for every dollar they kick in, I think it's almost $2 they get back from the federal government.
right, right.
It's ridiculous.
It is pretty ridiculous. And when people start saying things, well, we got to stop sending them money, or even bringing in the National Guard. Those are good thoughts, and if we could do it, that would be great. But that's a reaction to being treated badly by the federal government. There's got to be a more direct way to stop this thing. And there is a direct way. The Republicans could easily stop this tomorrow. And it looked like they might be starting to do that, stepping away from Donald Trump. And then we get this War Powers Act in the Senate. They get intimidated by Donald Trump and they vote for him. So there's been no real sign that the Republicans are starting to flinch a little bit when it comes to Donald Trump. They're still supporting him. And this is why I've said when this is all said and done, you're looking for somebody to blame, and Donald Trump has got a Big Mac stuck in his fucking gullet, and he's not breathing anymore. You're going to be looking for somebody to blame. And let's never forget the Republicans are culpable in this situation. We've got to come up with a quicker answer than cutting off funding for taxes. That won't really affect things for 2 years, even if they could do it. Same with the National Guard. You could bring them in to help protect the citizens, but then we've got clashes between the National Guard and the federal government. That's not an optimal situation. I mean, it's not going to go well for either side if that happens. There's got to be a better answer, a more direct answer to the problems we have, this unconstitutional ravaging of this country. And this is why we look to our politicians. That's why they're there. They're there to come up with answers and ways to protect us. And that's where Democrats and Republicans have fallen down every fucking time.
Yeah, they need to come up with a better solution. Now the weird part about this whole situation is when they're talking about ICE going door to door and all of the things that are going on. This is exactly what they warned us for 8 years Obama was going to do when it came to gun control. This is the
Right.
exact same thing we heard was going to happen for 4 years if Hillary had won. We heard it again under Joe Biden. No, they're going to come for your guns. And the right was always, I'd like to see him try over my dead body. I got my 2A right for this exact reason. Now, what do we hear out of the right? Comply or die, basically. Well,
Right.
you should just comply.
Well, yeah, you should just comply. But then so should have Ashley Babbitt. She should have complied. She
Exactly.
wouldn't be dead today. But here's what here's my concern, and this is where the Republicans are going to shit themselves. What Donald Trump is doing in Minnesota is punitive. He's trying to terrorize. He's trying to intimidate not only Tim Walz but the entirety of the state. You got a woman shot in the street, innocent woman. You got a guy shot in the leg last night. There's probably going to be more of these events because you've got more dumb fucks, ICE agents coming to the state of Minnesota. At some point, people are going to be scared to death, feeling like there's nowhere to turn, feeling like the government isn't helping them at all. And they're going to do the only thing they know, the right to bear arms. They're going to protect themselves, whether it's the castle doctrine or if it's on the streets. I mean, Rittenhouse can go shoot anybody he wants, so why wouldn't a Democrat do that if they're of that mindset? But the moment that somebody on the other side pulls out a gun and starts shooting, I guarantee you, Donald Trump, the federal government, they will come for the guns. That's standard, fascist fucking behavior.
I wouldn't surprise me one bit if the because Donald Trump has said it before. He said it during his first term. He was talking to whoever is it. I think it was his first term. He said,
Yeah, it
"Well, why don't we
was.
confiscate the gun? Why don't we confiscate the guns first? Figure out due process second." You know, if they feel threatened, the Republicans are going to be the ones to make that move. And here's the thing: we talk about how bad the blowout in the midterms and in 2028 could be. Could you imagine the blowback against the Republican Party if their administration is the one that tries tries to actually seize guns.
Yeah.
We
But do
we
they
think
care? But do they care at this point? I mean, they overturned Roe v. Wade. They're putting children in detention camps. They're killing women on the street. They're shooting guys in the legs. They're taking over cities. They're making us look like a third world country when you've got guys with machine guns at the airport and in malls and in schools and kicking down doors. Do they really give a fuck about appearances anymore? It doesn't seem as though they do care.
it's not about appearances. I still say that they are worried about electability and getting reelected. And once they start getting, they think that this path is going to get them there. It's not, but they think it will, and that they're worried about having, you know, that they won't understand how bad it really is until they are staring at a Democratic supermajority for a decade. And then they're going to be sitting there wondering, where the fuck did we go wrong?
So they're kind of like the dumb little kid who you tell, don't touch the oven because it's hot. Don't touch the oven because it's hot. So he touches the oven, he burns his hands, he's got blisters all over his hands, and then he says, maybe I shouldn't touch the fucking oven. Are you trying to tell me that Republicans in this country are that dumb? Full grown adults are going to wait until they get a foot up their ass before they wake up and realize that what they did was harming themselves.
A foot, a tent stake, something. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's the most troubling thing. I've often said that we have an epidemic of stupid in this country. Apparently, that epidemic has carried over to Congress because we have some weak, cowardly, stupid motherfuckers that think if they just go along with a goofball, literally a goofball, that everything's going to be all right. It's not going to be all right. This is going to go so badly. Donald Trump is in a fragile state at this point. And I guarantee this, when he is dead, when he is gone and he has no more power, there's going to be they're going to sell tickets to Monkey Pile on this motherfucker. He's going to be exposed in every way. And if I was Donald Trump's grandkids, I'd be looking at changing my name now because in history, it is going to be horrific for them.
Yeah, I firmly believe that when he is gone, the dog pile will commence. And that may be when everything comes out where, he was connected to Epstein, how he was connected, whether he was the kingpin, how dumb. Actually, I it wouldn't surprise me if after he is gone and JD Vance is trying to assert his dominance in as being president, even if he's put there because the Republicans moved on Donald Trump. It wouldn't surprise me if he comes out with a tell-all about how everybody around Donald Trump manipulated him because he is such a goof and he's such an idiot. The
All
dog
that stuff
pile.
is going to come out.
Oh yeah, that dog pile will commence, and it's going to be bad for Donald Trump. It's going to be bad for the Republicans, and we're going to find out exactly who was involved in manipulating this dumb fuck, and they all need to be held accountable too. And then we need to put in safeguards to prevent this from ever happening again. One of the things we talk about a lot on your lives, and I talk about in my live when I'm on there with, especially with TJ, is age limits and term limits.
Yeah.
And I think some combination of both.
But how do you get there when
Whether
Congress has to decide that?
Well, we would need to get some of the fuckers that have been in there. I think what's going to happen is once this next batch start coming up, as some of these older ones are forced to either retire or die because they've been in there for a lifetime, the younger
Yeah.
ones are going to be more willing to vote on it. And when I say like a term limit, I'm thinking for Congress, I was thinking shorter, but we're talking about something where like 20-ish years, enough time that where it's more than enough. It's still a lifetime, but you can get somebody younger in there who is closer to what younger people want and need and how in their experiences, and that would help. And then you put like an age limit of say 70. something like that. That when if you would cross that point at any time during your term, you can't be elected to that next term. You combine the two and make it happen. And I think that age limit should also apply to the presidency.
Millennials and Gen Z are quick to blame baby boomers for our problems. And even though I'm a baby boomer, I tend to agree with them. Not all baby boomers are bad. I mean, if you look at the followers I have on TikTok and here on YouTube and Spotify and such, there's a lot of baby boomers in there that are decent people that are of a similar mind. But what people have to understand in terms of the change that's going to happen is quickly start to change in 2028 is the baby boomers are responsible for the way our government is. They called them baby boomers because there was an inordinate amount of babies born between 1946 and 1964. Okay. I was born in 1960. I'm one of the younger baby boomers, almost Gen X, but I'm one of the younger baby boomers. The baby boomers are dying off, not only politicians, but voters. They're dying at a rate of 5 to 10,000 people a day. There'll come a time when millennials and Gen Z are in control. In 2028, it appears as though that may be the start of it. That's going to change the climate in this country completely. For the better or for the worse, I doubt it could be for the worse. Hopefully, it's for the better. But whatever we know of America and the way governments run in this country, it will be different by virtue of the baby boomers fucking dying off.
Yeah, it will. And part of the problem is while it is the fault of the boomers for some of the politicians that are in there, it's just as much, in my mind, uh, the problem of Gen X and millennials, where we didn't get involved in politics nearly as young as we could have.
True.
We didn't challenge, I'm in my mid 40s at this point, you know, as a millennial. We didn't challenge 20 years ago already the people that were in power. We just kind of let things ride. I mean, look here in Iowa, and I complain about him all the time. You've got a member of the silent generation, Chuck Grassley, still calling shots. Fucker's been in the Senate longer than I've been alive. And point is,
I prefer to call guys like Chuck Grassley, who's 90 something, not the silent generation, the incontinent generation. They gotta be.
you know, maybe, but then again, it wouldn't surprise me if his bowels are in better shape than Donald Trump's. Just saying.
Well,
Uh,
a 10 steak will do that to you.
yeah.
I hear. I
Uh,
hear.
Yeah, but we didn't step up and get involved in politics, not nearly as far as we should have. And we kept having this mindset of, well, it's doing okay. You know, we're going to go along to get along because things aren't doing too bad. They know what they're doing. And I think when they're finally gone and we have to step up, as at the same time millennials are stepping into the mix, you're going to start having Gen Z already going, we want the levers, we want the power
Right.
now. Because even us, they're going to say, you're too old. You don't know what it's like. You didn't grow up, with the same things we did. And they're right. I mean, I still remember what it was like to go to high school before school shooting drills were mandatory.
Absolutely.
You
Yeah.
know, I've I'm from a different age. There were a lot of things that have changed in the 20 plus years since I've been out of high school.
Well,
So,
when I went to high school and grade school and junior high school, we didn't talk about school shootings. That wasn't a thing. What we did is they had us hide under our desk in case there was a nuclear blast. Now, I didn't know desks could be that protective, but I'm thinking, why not make the whole school out of whatever you make desks out of? It was silly, and we're supposed to get under a desk, and we didn't even talk about school shootings. Things have changed so much um, uh, since those times. And you're right, Gen Z. Now, I saw an interesting poll, and I was kind of taken aback by it because a lot of Gen Z voted Republican, and I don't know why. But there's been a big change in Gen Z's attitude. I saw one of those poll guys on MSNBC who everybody likes. And during the 2024 election, the polling on Gen Z's was +6 for Democrats. Okay. Most of them voted Democrat, but a lot of them voted Republican. Only +6 for Democrats with Gen Z. You know what it is now? It's +20 Democrats. That's a big number of people. 14% more Gen Z are ready to vote for Democrats. And, when you got little kids, which is what to me Gen Zs are, um, sometimes they don't know a lot, and but they're smart enough to know when they get kicked in the ass that they better change their fucking ways.
Well, I think that's part of it. I think there's a double-edged sword there with Gen Z. Just little over a year ago, voting only +6 Democrat was the ones that voted Republican. I think they really believed us old timers, and that's what I feel like now as an old timer.
Yeah.
We're fear mongering.
Yeah.
That we were, it can't nearly be as bad as what you're claiming. What do you know? You're saying it's going to be this horrendous thing. Clearly, it can't be that bad. We'll prove you wrong. And then we're right. I said it before. We failed an open book test. We had, this was a test where all of the information was out in front of you. Almost all of the Gen Z holds the sum of human knowledge in their hands because almost all of them have a smartphone and they know how
Right.
to use it better than most of us old fucks.
Yeah.
And they couldn't figure it out, in part because they thought we were just fear mongering. And now that they've witnessed exactly how bad it could be, they're saying, fuck this shit. We don't want to go through it again. And that is a bigger teacher. This could turn a big chunk of Gen Z. You're talking if they're Democrat +20, what would that be? 70% of Gen Z
Yeah. Yeah.
voting voting for Democrats? You could have just potentially turned at least a significant portion of Gen Z off of voting Republican forever.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
Republicans don't even realize it. Like I don't think they've come to terms with how bad it's going to be for them.
If I was to talk to a Gen Z or even a millennial at this point, here's what you need to understand. If you don't like the baby boomers, if you don't like the Gen Xers, okay, cool. But if you continue to let them make the decisions for you, determine your destiny, you are going to be going through shit. And you know where I'm going to be? I'm going to be fucking dead. It's not going to matter to me anymore. So if it matters to you, what your life is going to be in the future, you better step up, you better get involved, and you better vote properly because I'll be gone. People of my age will be gone, but you're going to be stuck with what's left over. And if you don't like what you're seeing now, now is the motherfucking time you need to change it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think learning from the downfall of their vote is a big factor here. And the Republicans are going to have to come up with something. These uh, social issues and the oh well, it's all the immigrants' fault. It's not working anymore. Will
No.
says it all the time. And now that I think a big section of the country saw it, and they were reminded of exactly how bad it had been under the Trump administration as the cost of everything continues to climb and nothing is getting done. Um, all that happens is Donald Trump stands up there and says grocery prices are down. Well, that's in between snoring, but the whole thing is it's turning off a whole segment of voters.
Well, the Republicans were very successful in pushing the narrative that it's a problem because of immigrants. I want people to take a look around right now. Is our economy sucking because of immigrants? No. Are we fighting in Venezuela and possibly Greenland and Cuba and all these things because of immigrants? No. Are we getting innocent citizens killed on the streets of our cities because of immigrants? Kind of, but they aren't immigrants. We are doing it because we have a fascist in office who's been given free rein to do whatever the fuck he wants to do. If you want to get rid of some of the problems, you need to look at what is the cause of those problems. And any problems we have in this country now are not immigrant based. It's about government based and running rogue over us and doing whatever the fuck they want. They're telling you it's immigrants because they want you to side with them. But there is nothing that's going on right now that is caused directly by immigrants.
Exactly. And the whole point of why they were trying to blame immigrants is, well, and this is from the 1930s Germany playbook. But if you can blame all your problems on one group, and if you think your life is only bad because of that one group, you're not going to pay attention when they don't actually make your life any better. And in fact, they're making your life worse. And if you're still focused on blaming the group that you think is responsible, it doesn't make any sense. Like, did you see JD Vance's comments where he was talking? Now, I'm pretty sure this was a made up scenario because he, of course, didn't give any more specifics than, well, I was talking to a business owner.
Yeah.
And he said he was talking to a business owner who can't make it because he's paying his employees $16 to $18 an hour, but his competition is paying immigrants to do the same job for $6.80 an hour. And suddenly, he can't make any money. So it's the immigrants' fault that people can't make any money. No,
Well,
the shittier businessman is only making money because if the story is even true, is because he's paying people illegally under minimum wage. And if your business model is that you can only succeed and make money if you're paying people shitty wages, you're doing something wrong.
well, you're absolutely doing something wrong, and they're short-sighted in the sense that I can't make any money because I have to pay somebody poverty wages, 16 bucks an hour. Um, where the problem with that comes in is maybe you're failing because you're not paying them enough money and nobody can buy your shit anymore. Taxes aren't being paid on reasonable wages. It's so short-sighted. If didn't Henry Ford, wasn't he the one that said, I've got to pay these people enough so they can buy my cars? And
Yep.
and that was somebody with some foresight who understood what the economy is. We're talking about simple greed here. I want all the money, not just a lot of it. I want all the money, and I want to leave somebody um, in desperation or destitute. And I don't care as long as I have all the money. Well, if you have all the money, who are you going to sell to? Where are the taxes going to come from? Because you're somehow bypassing paying taxes. Not paying people enough money may be one of the biggest problems we have in our economic system because it's not planning for the future. If people can't buy homes, if they can't buy cars, if they can't take trips, if they can't qualify for anything like a house or something like that, what's that going to do to the fucking economy? The economy's going to be shit. And all these people that have been greedy, they're going to have no place to go. They're going to have their dick in their hand going, whoa, I never realized this. But again, two dumb fucks like you and I can sit here and understand what the future holds, and we get it. And these alleged people of power can't grasp it.
Yeah, you're right. You mentioned Henry Ford. Something else. Not only did he say he had to pay his employees enough that they could buy the cars he was selling, he also had a policy that the top person in the company, which was himself, could make no more than 7 times what the lowest paid employee made.
Right.
He said that's enough of a gap to where they can still afford to buy my cars and I'm making enough money. If I want to make more money, they need to make more money. And that's actually should be a good policy. Problem is you have these, like you said, the CEOs and the rich people, they want it all. And they are not going to be happy until they have it all. The wealth inequality in this country is ridiculous and it has only gotten worse in my lifetime. It was closer pre-Reagan, and it has only
Yeah.
gotten worse because of Reagan.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We're coming toward the end, and I want to bring, since we're talking about Ford, I want to bring this up. A story that was out yesterday about how Donald Trump was roaming around a Ford factory where they make F-150s in Detroit. He's trying to show that he's on the side of the working man. Except while he's walking through, there's a guy by the name of TJ Stabula, I believe his name is, just a line worker, just a guy. And as Donald Trump is walking by some catwalk or something, he yells out, "You're a pedo protector. You're a pedophile protector." Donald Trump, the president of the United States, looks at him and says, points at him and says, "Fuck you. You're a piece of shit." And then as he's walking away, he gives him the finger. Now, Ford, the company, bent to Donald Trump and they suspended this guy. They suspended this guy and they wanted to appease Donald Trump. They suspended the guy and they bent to Donald Trump. So they suspended him. And of course, the union is upset about this now because Mr. Stabula has one thing that they hadn't considered, and that is the First Amendment right to speak his mind. Now, granted, Ford can fire him or whatever, but Ford is setting themselves up for real fucking trouble because if there's a boycott in a market with selling cars right now that's already bad, that's going to put them in a bad situation, much worse than whatever Donald Trump could do. But the good news about this whole thing is, much like the Republicans do for the shooter in Minneapolis or whatever, somebody started a GoFundMe for this guy that was suspended and will probably be ultimately fired. How much do you think? Last I heard, you know how much they gained in the GoFundMe for TJ Stabula? Take a wild
100
guess.
grand, 100
100
grand.
grand, 700 grand is what they got for him last I heard, and it's probably more than that by now. And they figured it out. They figured it out that with that 700 grand, that equates to about 17 years of him working at Ford. So don't worry about TJ Stabula. In fact, if you're walking through, working in a factory and you see dumbass Donnie Trump coming by, it may be profitable for you to tell him exactly what you fucking think.
Yeah, that whole situation was dumb. Uh, but what I tell people all the time is when you are working for somebody, you don't have a First Amendment, not really. Even though Donald Trump didn't like what this guy says, he's still there. He still represented Ford, and Ford can say or do, they can tell you what to say basically, and if they didn't like it, they can punish you. But, and I'm not defending Ford in this. Them going after this guy is definitely an appeasement to Donald Trump, and it's just ridiculous. But what did Donald Trump expect? He shows up, does all this, and he expects them to cheer for him. And now I don't know if it was before or after TJ goes after this guy. And what is it with guys named TJ being
Yeah, no shit.
loud like that? Call out to our friend TJ the plumber. But at one point during this interview or press conference he gave at this Ford plant, did you see what he said? He said, "Well, it's good that Ford here has 5,000 job openings because pretty soon they're going to have a thing called robots." So, he shows up and starts talking about robots taking these guys' jobs, and he wants them to, kiss his ass and treat him like he's royalty or some bullshit. It's completely dumb, but I'd expect nothing less out of Donald Trump.
The last thing I want to bring up is maybe one of the most appalling things. Renee Good was murdered innocently. She was guilty of nothing when she was murdered in the streets of Minneapolis. This 6-year-old son of hers is now orphaned because his father died in 2023. Now, his grandfather said he's going to come pick him up. And I thought that was a great thing that a grandpa would come pick up his grandson. Any grandpa of any salt would do that. But then we hear something interesting that Renee Good's father, this 6-year-old kid's grandpa, is a big time Trump humper. A big time Trump humper. And somebody on CBS, the clown that they replaced, whoever they replaced with, asked him, he's a Trump fan, but he's upset that you're calling her domestic terrorist because he knew his daughter wasn't domestic terrorist. And Donald Trump bumbled and bobbled and said shit that didn't mean anything. It wasn't a very good appearance for him. But then the father was asked about it again. And the father, the grandfather of the child, he says, "Well, I love my daughter, and I miss her, and it's sad, but the fact that she was in that situation means she wasn't walking with God." But you piece of shit, you should not have the option to raise that kid. His mom is dead. His dad is dead. His mom was killed by the motherfucker that you voted for. I just don't get people. I don't understand how they even think like this. Their kid is dead, and he's trying to blame it on that she's not close enough to God, as if those ICE agents are.
Yeah, that's it's something I'll never understand about religious people like that. They try to justify things or explain it away or whatever, and they put the blame, like in this case, on the victim and not on the person who did the act. It's just completely bizarre. And the other thing about this whole situation is apparently Renee Good was married to a woman,
Yeah.
the way I understand it. And apparently the grandfather is stepping in and saying, well, you're not going to be able to raise your stepkid because, we're family, you're not, or whatever. And that in itself is another tragedy in this whole situation.
Well, legally speaking, because he is a blood relative, the actual next of kin, he would get priority over a stepmom. I understand that, but what point do we decide what's best for the fucking kid? To send him off with some Trump humping stupid motherfucker that voted for somebody that killed his mom? I don't see how that makes any sense.
It doesn't, but I took a psychology class years ago. And one of the things we talked about was a problem when it comes to the law and the courts when it comes to custody of kids. And one of the things the professor mentioned was, well, so you have parents who abuse the kid, right?
Right.
And he gave an example of uh, parents here in Iowa who got caught. It had been a state story, kind of big news at the time. They were keeping the kid, I don't remember how old, in like a dog kennel and
Oh, wow.
just just horrendous stuff. But the first instinct was when they removed the child from the home was he went to grandma. Well, grandma raised one of the two people that ended up treating him that way. So how much better is grandma?
Right. Yeah, that's
But there's an overarching idea that everybody thinks when they think of their grandparent or when they think of a grandparent, they envision the sweet little old lady who bakes cookies for grandma and the joking grandpa, you know, and that's the image they get. They think all grandparents are that way, and they're just not. And there's a problem there and a disconnect when it comes to what should happen here. Probably in the best interest would be to stay with the step parent because I guarantee you that would have probably been the wishes of Renee Good.
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's a sad thing when we see what's going on with kids today and the parents, how they are, and grandparents. Some of these kids don't have a fucking chance. They don't have a fucking prayer. And it's sad. I don't even know how we fix that. We've got to get better people in this country. We are replete with shitbags. It's unfortunate. Um, a lot of them are older and baby boomers, but we got them amongst the millennials, the Gen Zs, Gen Xs. They're all contaminated with people that just have no business raising children. Well, Eric, I'm going to wrap things up for the Rational Boomer podcast. Thank you for coming on tonight. I'm in Georgia. I'll be back in Minnesota tomorrow, so we'll be back on track with kind of a normal schedule. But I appreciate you coming on and give us your insights. I know people look forward to it.
Well, like I said, thanks for having me. I love being on the show. I love to give people the opportunity to hear my insights. If you are looking for me, you can find me over on TikTok, maybe at Analytical Iowan. They've been fucking around with my account, putting my videos out on a 12-hour review.
Oh,
Um,
Jesus.
and then of course, no strikes. They get put up later. I think I've only had two videos cross 1,000 views all month so far. It's ridiculous. But you can find me on TikTok. You can find me on YouTube at Analytical Iowan, Blue Sky, and Spotify as well at Analytical Iowan. And of course, there's a link tree in my bio. If you find me on one, you will find me on all of them. So dealing with TikTok, but it's pissing me off.
Well, I will say this to the listeners of this podcast. We get a lot of people that listen on YouTube. We get a lot of people who listen on Spotify. And there's no reason in the world those same people shouldn't be listening to you too, because I listen to you. It's valuable for what I do. So if you're listening to this show right now, whether it be Spotify or YouTube, make sure you go follow Eric, the Analytical Iowan, because it will pay dividends as far as information that you need going forward. Those of you listening, I want to thank you for taking the time to do that. I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.